Look, this league is all about quarterbacks, has been for a while, and this football game between the Texans and the Rams really, ultimately, I don't want to overly simplify it, but it comes down to the quarterbacks and how can you keep them upright. And they both have their own sets of challenges. Both are facing really good defensive lines. With Matt Stafford, really, it's okay. Does his back hold up? With C.J. Stroud, as we've been talking about all offseason, it's how does this new offensive line hold up? How does Nick Caley operate not just as an offensive coordinator, but in getting that offensive line and the tight ends and the running backs, everybody to protect for the love of God, protect C.J. Stroud. C.J. was asked about the offensive line in this press conference. I took four of the answers that I really liked from C.J. today. Here's C.J. on the offensive line.
Yeah, I think, one thing about this group that I'm really proud of is that, man, they're dogs, man, from left to right, up and down, no matter the age or the position. I think everybody, that we got up there loves to play and plays really hard. The effort is there, and, I think got a great challenge. This D-line is really good, starting to reverse. He's really, really good and really strong, powerful. Has different type of rushes, good in the run game, 55, 91. 0, really all of them are really good. So, I think this is a great challenge for us, and those guys they know that and they're preparing. So, I think it's gonna be a great battle.
Yeah. So, look, the offensive line going to be a huge deal. The guys that I've neglected to talk about as much because I'm just so enamored of Jared Verse and just so fascinated by him are Braden Fisk, obviously, but also Poona Ford. I think Poona Ford, the nose tackle for the Rams, probably one of the one of the most impactful free agency moves potentially that didn't get a whole lot of press, but Poona Ford's really, really good. If you remember the Chargers game last year, Poona Ford kept showing up, making tackles for a loss, even as the Chargers defense struggled, going versus the interior offensive line with the Texans, where I think the scheme is going to be better. I think they're going to be better coached, but there's times where you just got to block guys one-on-one, and they've got challenges this week. That's where when you can help Ariante Ursi out with chip blocks, you can help him out with keeping a tight end in. I think the tight ends are going to be better in pass protection. But those interior three, particularly when it comes to handling the games and the stunts, when the defense isn't blitzing but they're just running games, TE games and whatnot. The Texans were one of the worst teams in the league at that last year. The Rams were one of the most effective. I've seen that look good so far in camp. They haven't been tested the way they're going to be tested this week. But, D'Amico in his press conference said he was tired of all the questions about the offensive line. But he gets it. I mean, I'm sorry, D'Amico, but you swapped out 4 starters. You got a new offensive line coach and a new offensive coordinator. He knows it's a big deal. It's a big deal, but we won't know until Sunday, and this is a really good test. CJ, on how this scheme perhaps fits his skills better than last year's scheme.
It's a lot of different ways. I feel like a lot of times in the NFL, from what I've learned, is like a lot of coaches or teams try to make like the player fit the scheme instead of the scheme fitting the player. And I think it's sometimes a good thing because you get to challenge yourself to try new things, but also I think, you should come in and try to have the scheme fit the players in a way, just because, there's certain guys are really good at X, Y, and Z and not good at A, B, and C. And I think there's a balance you need to have to challenge yourself to try new things, but also doing things that you're already naturally good at. So this offense does a good job at that of trying to or doing things that guys are naturally good at, but also challenging to try new things. So.
The really interesting thing about this game, there are a lot of similarities between these two teams, not just common ties between Nick Caley or Sean McVay or a Shanahan connection or anything like that, but it's that, CJ's kind of following the same progression that Sean McVay did a couple years ago when he got Matt Stafford 5 years ago now. When he got Matt Stafford and he was in that Shanahan school, which is a little bit more rigid or a lot bit more rigid, which is great for younger quarterbacks at times. But when you get a guy like Matt Stafford, you want to drop. He's a drop back passer who can excel at a lot of the high football IQ type of stuff, directing traffic and being a pure drop back passer. And I think that's what CJ ultimately is going to be really good at. And you kind of handcuff guys at times when you don't give them that command behind the line of scrimmage. So CJ's following that same progression and moving on from a Shanahan style scheme into more of a quarterback-driven system. I think in terms of what CJ can do, the thing that I really like right now about the team, I've got my questions about the offensive line and just how good they can be, but man, these last 2 years in the playoffs, we've seen what's happened to the wide receiving core. They were just beleaguered by injuries, and he's out there with a skeleton crew of wide receivers. I like the depth of this. If Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins particularly, if those guys both work out and are effective receivers in their rookie years, you can sustain some injuries. And then I really like that they've doubled up at the slot receiver, that Christian Kirk and Jalen Noel, and then I would add Woody Marks to that as almost a quasi slot receiver and a receiver that can work out of the backfield, line him up on the line of scrimmage, whatever you want to do with him. CJ's got more options early in the down. It's going to be another similarity in this game, I think. You don't want to put too much on the individual battles for the offensive line, so the quick game is going to be essential. Likewise, for Matt Stafford, when they're not quite sure exactly how he's going to fare working through this back injury, this herniated disc, I think they're going to be getting the ball out really quickly. And then both teams are going to lean into the run game, and then they're going to try to take their shots. Stafford's going to get max protection at times and figure out where he's got opportunities downfield, and likewise with C.J. Stroud. So it might be one of those rare games that's relatively low scoring, but with some really poignant highlight reel moments where guys take shots downfield. On Matt Stafford, we know that CJ is a big fan of Matt Stafford. He was asked what he admires about Matt Stafford's game.
I like his game. Yeah, I mean he does a good job of anticipation, no-look throws, moving guys with his eyes, coverage recognition. I think he can put the ball in any spot at any time, from any arm angle. Does a good job with bad pockets is something I watched too. So yeah, he does a lot of great things, and yeah, he's a really good player.
Yeah, that was a good answer. I said, what does CJ like about his game? And CJ said, I like his game. Just blunt and to the point in terms of, like reading coverages, understanding where he can take his shots. And Davante Adams is on this squad, so you can't help but think back to the Jets last year, where Aaron Rodgers was not. He hasn't been the same guy for a few years now. But in the second half of that Jets game, one of the big plays was Texans dialed up a six-man blitz. Jalen Petre's on Davante Adams with no help over the top. And meanwhile, also remember with a very young Kalen Bullock at that point, where Kalen Bullock, I think, with a little bit more age and experience, starts to understand where the threats are, and maybe he avoids a touchdown on that. But Aaron Rodgers with Henry To'oTo'o in his face throws off-platform, kind of three-quarter arm angle, and hits a touchdown to Davante Adams. And I don't get mad at Jalen Petre in that moment. The blitz, they dialed up the right blitz. Henry To'oTo'o has said that, man, if he had just taken like a half step of a different angle, he would have been there, and all that's true. But there's just no accounting sometimes for that experience and that savvy and that ability of any older quarterback with or without a back problem to dial up a play like that. So there's those moments. Like, you can't go into this game expecting anything less than the very best version of Matt Stafford. I also, listen, J.J. Watt, I was not excited to see JJ today on the McAfee show talking about the time that he had a herniated disc in week 4 or week 5 of the regular season and ended up finishing that season. I'm guessing that was 2015 because 2016 was when he had the back issues in the summer. But he played the whole season as a 290-pound defensive end. So as I've been sitting here saying, like, well, a herniated disc for a quarterback, I don't know. A defensive tackle or a defensive end that faces a lot more physical strain on a down-by-down basis than a quarterback does. So I'm just going in expecting that Matt Stafford at some point this year is probably going to have issues with his back, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen in week 1. And that's where Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson come in. I thought this was an interesting and a good answer. The lesson for the youth and those 54-year-olds like myself amongst us. CJ, on how you build trust with wide receivers.
Yeah, I know it's kind of weird, but I would say, like, failure is probably the best way to get that done in ways. Like throwing the ball, like even now, me and Nico sometimes don't connect, and that there's good things because now we can have a conversation. So sometimes it's in practice, like when it's too perfect, which is also a goal, sometimes it cannot be good because in the game it's not going to be exactly how we draw it up or the scout guys give it to us. So I think sometimes like having hard conversations are like, bro, you need to be better here, I need to be better there. So I think that has to do with it. And yes, playing the games definitely does help.
Yeah. I don't want to get too much into the squishy motivational stuff here, but I told you guys a couple weeks ago, I can't even remember where I read it now, but it was somebody talking about failure as a necessary ingredient for success, and that you always have to remember that man, like there's nothing great is ever accomplished without failing along the way a bunch of times. And if you just start to frame it as, yeah, the failures are good, the mistakes are great, because now we got something to work with. And yeah, if it's going a little too smoothly, for one, we know that in football, if it's going too well for the Texans offense during training camp, that means that it's not going so hot for the Texans defense, and vice versa. So we did start to see more of a battle as the training camp progressed, and the offense wasn't having a ton of success in those first couple of weeks. This was, I think that was the last one I had on CJ. Let me see if we got any comments up in here. Kaja says Stanford is a dog, can't underestimate. 100% agree. LL Productions just became a member. Awesome, especially as we get into the season. Going to be doing more stuff exclusively for members, but then also sometimes, especially in the post-game stuff, where I don't want any stinking opposing fans in the comments after a game. It could be members-only comments and a few of those. Bunch of you mentioning that CJ looks slimmer. I'll tell you this. The one thing I noticed from seeing him in person, the first thing that struck me was you could see the weight room work. Like, CJ's always been a thicker guy, like more muscular, like a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. They're bigger than you expect when you see him. So he's always been a bigger guy, and like with a big lower body. But you could tell he hasn't been skipping leg days, and I like that. Having a sturdier platform, a lot of the mobility of a quarterback, this is something that Lamar Jackson is awesome at. So Lamar Jackson obviously I'm not asking C.J. Stroud to be the next Lamar Jackson. That's impossible. But it's Lamar's running ability is one thing, but it's his sturdiness and his strength in the pocket that a lot of times he'll take one step to the left, and then somebody might, be hitting him or something, but he's just so sturdy that leg strength and that athleticism really pays dividends even as a pocket passer. And CJ has that good awareness as long as the pass protection isn't in complete shambles for the first three quarters. So I'm good. Look, CJ was asked a lot of the same questions he's been asked for the last 3 months in this press conference. Likewise with D'Amico, who I'll probably get to later. It's time. It's time to play football. I feel good about this game. Ultimately, I think that despite my questions about the Texans' offensive line, they're gonna be sure they're gonna scheme ways for there to be protection. It's that Texans defensive line going up against Matt Stafford with a back issue that I think at some point the dam just breaks, and I'm feeling good about it. Everybody have a great day. Like, subscribe.